Hi, it's Carly here from Tribe. I've been a student of personal growth for a very long time now, and to me one of the most fundamental things in the personal growth world is really about personal power. And by personal power, I'm referring to essentially our ability to generate the results that we want to generate in our lives. And to me, personal power is really about putting ourselves at cause. It's training ourselves to notice the ways in which we are creating the results that we want to get. You know, the opposite of that is really putting ourselves at effect, right? And putting our attention on the ways in which things are out of our control, that we're victimized by our circumstances or by people. And one way of looking at this and framing it is learning how to generate an internal locus of control. What can I actually do about the situations that I'm in versus an external locus of control where I'm affected at the things. And of course, this is not to say that there's lots of things that are outside of our control that we are actually affected by, but it's just not that useful to put our attention there. You know, it's not really useful to focus on the things that are outside of our control. You know, I think it's important to acknowledge those things and to kind of have compassion for ourselves and others around those things. But if we actually want to be in a position of power, then we need to pay attention to, well, what can I do about those things? What actions can I take? What perspectives can I adopt in response to those things? You know, and another way of saying this really is it's maximizing our ability to respond, our response ability. You know, so personal power to me is basically responsibility. Except of course, the word responsibility I think is quite overloaded. There's like a lot of there's like different ways that people use that word, which isn't really the kind of the definition I'm referring to here. And I think it's important to understand some of those ways that people use that word. So one way I think is kind of like a form of obligation. You know, like you be responsible, take responsibility, as in like, you know, you should be doing something, you know, or I should like do this thing. You know, for me, I think about being a parent, you know, and sometimes parenting feels like an obligation. It feels like a chore. It feels like this thing that I have to do, you know, and there's like a heaviness associated with that, you know. So, and to me, that's not responsibility. You know, as soon as I think of something as an obligation, then I'm trapped by it. You know, and of course, sometimes there are aspects of parenting that I'd rather not have to do. But if I like step back and consider the bigger picture, you know, that I want to have, you know, a loving family and healthy, happy kids, you know, that I feel connected to, then the things that seem like a chore start to actually become a choice. I'm like, yeah, I don't really like having to do this right now, but it's part of this bigger picture of something that I want to create. So that's one piece that I think that people misinterpret kind of what responsibility is. And then there's another piece I think where we can like put ourselves at cause, but more in a kind of like a self-blaming kind of way. And really this is like a form of shame where I'm like, oh my God, I'm a shitty person. You know, I'm not actually responding as effectively as I could be. And oh my God, like I got angry at my kids and shit, I'm fucked up, you know. Okay, well, like, yes, I'm like looking at myself and my role in this thing, but it's in a way where I'm like collapsing. I'm like making myself small in a sense and feeling kind of hurt and lost and not feeling my sense of self-worth, you know. And that's not a place of personal power, right? So I think, you know, putting myself at cause means actually being upright and being clear about, you know, what's important to me, and from that place having, you know, looking at where I have choice. So I want to like now translate these ideas of personal power more into the relational domain, which is, you know, what a lot of these Facebook lives are about, right? And the relational domain, one of the key distinctions that kind of we work with at Tribe is this idea of owning experience. And Damien mentioned it in his Facebook Live yesterday. And to me, this is like a largely what kind of having this stance of personal power in the relational domain is about. So owning experience is about what's happening for me in this dynamic, and the most basic version of this is I statements, and I statements is like a pretty well-known and popular thing that's kind of used in communication world, and so I statements is about using I language, I think this, I feel this, rather than using you language, and an example that I use quite a bit is saying, like I could say to somebody, you're being aggressive, right? And the I statement version of it could be, I feel scared. And not to say that the other person, the other person could be being aggressive, but I don't know that for sure, right? So in their world, maybe actually they're just like being passionate. That's what it's like for them. But for me, it's like seems like really overbearing and it seems aggressive. But actually, more on the inside of my experience, I'm actually just like feeling a bit scared and a bit overwhelmed. So this is then a version of putting the locus of control, the center of what I'm focusing on inside my own experience. And there's a kind of a funny thing here in that saying that I feel scared, it could seem like a sense of weakness. That's not like personal power. It could have come across as it not being personal power. And of course, there is the collapsed shame version of that where I go into like, oh my God, I'm scared. But there's like a version of that where I'm actually just like acknowledging what I'm feeling. Actually, just like an aside here, one thing that I think is really important to be aware of is that, a lot of the time I don't choose what I feel. My feelings actually happen to me. Like I certainly have choice. I can shift my feelings. I can shift my physiology and I can shift what I'm paying attention to help shift my feelings. But a lot of the time, I just feel things that come up based on stimulus that's come at me, and I haven't chosen those things. So I might feel scared. I didn't choose to feel scared, but I am. And if I'm kind of aware of that and owning that, then I have more choice from that place. So relationally, what I could do at that point is I could choose to make a request or set a boundary, like, hey, I'm feeling scared and a bit overwhelmed right now. Could we just like, pause and take a few deep breaths, or let's actually just like stop this conversation right now and kind of take a 10-minute break and come back again, or hey, I'm feeling quite scared right now. You seem a bit aggressive. Can you lower your voice? You're speaking very loud, and I'm like feeling a bit confronted around that. So relationally, these are the types of things that we can do to put ourselves at cause. This is where we can have choice. So these are the types of responses that I could make. If I'm feeling a particular way, I could set boundaries, I make requests, and so on. So certainly I'm very passionate about the practice of like what it is to have personal power, and then just to take the personal power into the relational domain. And that's a lot of kind of what we're teaching is like what are the types of responses that we can have in that relational domain. But then what gets really interesting here is that and this is something I feel a lot of care about and I'm like a big stand for, which is how do we actually like maximize our sense of personal power collectively? So it's not an either or, like I'm in a power position or you are, that we can both be in a power position. So this example of like, I'm feeling scared, and what's the kind of, the responses I can take from that kind of place. But in your world, you're not being aggressive, you're just like, feeling passionate. So rather than telling you, what your reality is, owning experience means that I can leave space for you to have your own version of reality too, and so that you can then choose to have the most powerful response for you as well. So maybe you're being passionate, and if you hear that I'm feeling scared from your level of passion, then what's the place of power that you can operate out from there? Maybe you can be like, like I didn't mean to come across in a way that had you feel scared. But I do really want to like communicate my passion here, because this point is like super important for me. So let me just like try and like slow down a little bit and kind of be a little bit more gentle in my expression. But at the same time, I do want to like you know, express the full extent of the energy that I feel around this topic, you know. And so I really want to like create those types of cultures, you know, where we can all just like be in this kind of fullest expression of, you know, what's true for us and the most powerful version of who we are, so we can be kind of resourceful and most responsive. I think that's everything I want to say. I find this like a really deep topic, you know, particularly when we're talking about maximizing, you know, power collectively. And so there are kind of future lives that I'd like to do around this. But I hope this makes sense. And yeah, I'd love to hear ways in which you know, you find yourself wanting to have more personal power, maybe being kind of victimized, or feeling victimized by circumstance, and how you could like shift your attention away from these things. Actually, like one last point here for me is, I think this takes a lot of practice, you know, a lot of reconditioning, you know. So it's like habituating how I pay attention, you know. So like learning to pay attention to those ways in which I could take action, those ways in which I could have a response, you know, I could choose to do something, you know. And it can be like real practice to actually learn how to notice what those things are, you know. And so one version of that practice, I think, is using I statements, you know, learning how to actually, in this dynamic, rather than what am I perceiving out there, what's actually going on inside of me, you know. And it's like constantly having to like ask ourselves, this is what I found in my journey, like, you know, ask myself, what's my experience right now, and learning how to voice that, you know. And so yeah, I think this can take quite a bit of time and can take quite a bit of you know, reconditioning of patterns. You know, one pattern I think about for myself is at the moment, like I can really easily get irritable, you know. And so this is something I don't necessarily like choose, like I was saying before, to have this response, but it's something that comes up for me, you know. And so learning how to like pay attention to what's going on for me, to have a resourceful response around what's happening there. And that might be to like actually buffer my irritability with other people, and maybe just call it out, like, hey, I'm feeling a little bit irritable and I'm sorry for that, and I just like need to take some time to myself to kind of, you know, come back to a more sense of ease. But then there's like the larger picture of that pattern too, of like, why is it that I like have that kind of response? You know, why is it that I get irritable? And over time, how can I recondition a more resourceful response? You know, I think about my kids again, you know, how easily I can just be like stop asking me for more stuff, you know. And if I'm focused, if I have like a response that I can call on just like in the moment, like it's my kind of unconscious response in a sense, if I can condition that to just be like, actually, I'm a no right now to responding to these demands, or yes, I can do that, but in 10 minutes I'm going to take some time to myself, or whatever it's going to be. Cool, now I think I'm done. Thank you for watching.